Welcome back to another episode of Barbecue and Bottles, and today we're going to be doing Gravlax at home. There's no other cook that we do that will save you more money than buying this at an actual butcher shop. This piece of salmon here, this was about $80 Canadian, which is today's exchange rate about probably $55 US, and this is a sashimi grade salmon. 4 pounds. If you were to go and buy lox, you're going to be paying somewhere between US $15 to $18 for a quarter pound. So we're getting 4 pounds of this Gravlax recipe for just over $50. Really incredible value, really easy recipe. And if you've got some time while we're all here on lockdown or shelter in place or whatever you want to call it, this is a great one to try out. So let's get into it. What you're gonna need is just some kosher salt, some freshly ground black pepper, and we're using a little bit of rosemary. Now, with rosemary, you normally more see dill with Gravlax, but we're gonna pair our final Gravlax with a little bit of dill when we put it on a bagel. And so we don't actually wanna use dill during the curing process. So we thought we'd spice it up with a little bit of rosemary. And we're not using sugar, because we're gonna do this pure keto, but we'll give you the recipe if you wanna actually pair it with a little bit of sugar. So we'll give you both cures depending on what you wanna try and do at home. But importantly, you've gotta use sashimi grade salmon here. You're essentially eating this raw, even though the cure will cook it a little bit, but you wanna spend as much as you can on a good quality side of sashimi grade salmon. So for every pound of salmon, we're gonna use a 1/4 cup of kosher salt. We'll use 1 tablespoon of ground black pepper. And if we were using sugar, we'd add 2 tablespoons of sugar. But again, we're not doing that. We're making a keto recipe here. So because we've got a 4-pound fish, we're gonna go in for a full cup of kosher salt. And then we'll just add that in here into a little mixing bowl. And now we're gonna add in 4 tablespoons of freshly ground black pepper. This isn't freshly ground, but it's very fresh. You can really tell with this coarse ground black pepper. Kirkland does a great job of using fresh sources for their spices. All right, now we're just gonna mix that together, get that nice and even. Now we'll just take the leaves from a few sprigs of rosemary. You don't wanna get any of the stems in here. And we're just gonna give this a rough chop. We don't want this too finely chopped because we wanna be able to rinse it off after the cure is done very easily, because we're not actually cooking the rosemary. We just want the rosemary to impart flavors into the salmon. There, so nice rough chop like that. And then we'll add that in here as well. Perfect. Now, to prepare for the salmon cure, we're gonna get 2 sheets of cellophane out here, just lined up along the countertop. All right, now with the 2 sheets of cellophane laid down like this, and you've got a little bit of overlap in the middle, what we're gonna do is just sprinkle down a little bit of our cure where we're going to place the fish. Now we used a little bit less than half of that, and now we're gonna place our fish skin side down, and it's important that you put this skin side down, just like that. Beautiful. Now we'll take the rest of this cure and just lightly sprinkle it along the top. Now you wanna make sure you're getting all sides of the fish here and a nice even layer. This is gonna then sit in the fridge here for 48 hours while it firms up. We're gonna get a ton of moisture that's gonna wick out of this fish, and that is what's gonna give it that traditional Gravlax texture that we know and love. Now, if you want this to be a little bit less salty, you have the option of just curing it for 24 hours or 36 hours. And we just suggest, you play around with the recipe, you figure out what works for you, and you just stick with that. This all ultimately just comes down to personal taste and personal preferences. As with most things that we do on this channel, So don't take our recipes as the gospel, just play around with it, make your own little tweaks, and come up with something that works for your family. All right, with this salmon covered in the cure, what we're gonna do is just take our saran wrap and wrap our fish as tightly as we can, just like that, as tightly as we can here. Perfect, and then fold up the edges. And this doesn't have to be a perfect seal at all. We've got the cure in here that's gonna keep this fish safe. Now we'll just transfer it to a cookie sheet or a baking tray. You'll want the baking tray to have an edge because there's gonna be juices that will inevitably leak out of this, and you don't want that going all over your fridge. You want it to be self-contained within your cookie sheet. So with that, let's take this to the fridge and put this to rest for 48 hours. Okay, we're 48 hours later. Let's check in on our salmon. One thing I forgot to mention before is you need to actually weigh down your salmon. So we just grabbed 2 glass Tupperware containers here. They're fairly heavy in their own right, and then we added a little extra weight to this one as well. So you can use Tupperware and then put some canned beans or any other canned food to act as your weight, but you want to have a little bit of pressure on the surface of the steak while it cures away for 2 days. So you can see we've got a lot of juices that have come out of the salmon here, and as we mentioned, you want to have this in a baking tray with a rim because you want to collect all that. I can only imagine the trouble I'd be in with my wife if I actually let all that juice go all over the fridge. So next step is just getting this fish out of the saran wrap, rinsing it off, and then we'll show you how to slice this up. So now we're gonna make sure that our kitchen's running cold water, and we're just gonna rinse off our salmon. And you wanna give this a thorough rinse. You wanna get off all of the pepper and the rosemary on the exterior. There might be a little bit left, but you wanna get the majority of that off. And then flip it over, and you'll do the same thing on the skin side. And now with the rinse done, we're just gonna pat this dry. So lay it down on a paper towel on the cutting board that you're gonna use to then slice up your Gravlox. Get this nice and dry. So you can see we've got a beautiful color to the salmon here now. This is after our 48-hour dry brine. We've got the cure rinsed off, and there's a real firmness to the fish as well. We've wicked out a lot of moisture. It's no longer that raw salmon flesh that you'd get from your fishmonger. It's actually cured and it's a bit stiffer now. At this step, you can do one of 2 things. You can either start slicing into this and make what's called traditional Gravlox. That's what we're gonna do today. Or if you wanna make Novalox, which is cold smoked salmon, we'll put a link in the description down below if you wanna see our video on how to make Novalox. But you can go ahead and cold smoke this fish. There's a whole process behind how you go around cold smoking it. So we'd suggest you check out our video on that if that's the process you want to head down. But now we got to show you the specific technique on how to slice into this fish. You're going to want to get a fairly large knife. We've got a Japanese sashimi knife here, so we're going to try using that. Or if you don't have one of these, you can use a brisket knife for a brisket carver. So first, what you're going to want to do is just start down at this end of the fish, and we're gonna cut a few starter pieces here just to get going in terms of the right angle that we're looking for. So the technique here, you're gonna wanna use one hand on this side of the fish and then just slice as thin of a piece as you possibly can. And ideally, as you're slicing through, you wanna actually see right through the piece of fish that you're slicing, almost that it's translucent and you can see your knife on the other side. That's the way you know you're getting the right thickness. So we're just gonna slowly carve away at the whole fish, slicing off pieces like this. Now to actually store this, what we're gonna do is get a little piece of glass Tupperware, and then we're just gonna lay this down nicely on the base of that Tupperware. And once we get a full layer on the bottom of your Tupperware, we'll just lay down another piece of parchment paper like this, and then continue on with layers of your salmon. And that's just gonna make it easier when you freeze it. You can pull this out, you can take out one layer at a time or however many layers that you want for your dinner party. And it's just a lot easier than having a giant Tupperware container full of Gravlox. And you'll see I've switched to the brisket carving knife. I think the serrated edge is just making it a little bit easier to actually slice through the salmon. So I'd recommend a knife with a serrated edge if you end up having one. So you can serve this on fresh bagels, you can serve it by itself, you can serve it accompanied with some fresh dill, you can serve it on salads, you can serve it with chopped red onions and capers and dill. It's really a pretty versatile thing to cook up, and you don't have to worry about eating the whole thing in a short period of time. This freezes really well. So we just take this out of the freezer, pop out a layer of the parchment paper, and just leave the rest in there. You can have this in the freezer for over 6 months and you're still fine, good to go. And you can see there's just incredible marbling in this fish. Right here, we've got those omega-3 fats running all throughout this salmon. When you're choosing your side of salmon, you want to be really, really careful about getting a high-grade sashimi grade salmon that's got great marbling through here. So now we've got the full salmon carved up. We've got 2 Tupperware containers sliced up like this, just packed to the brim. So that's 4.5 pounds of salmon that we've made into Gravlox at a super affordable price relative to what you can get it at your butcher. So if you like this video, consider subscribing to the channel, give it a like, consider leaving a comment on what kind of videos you want to see to come. And of course, if you want to see that cold smoking video, it'll be up here on the screen somewhere if you want to click that and continue on with the cold smoking method. Thanks for tuning in.